listener production. Hi, Sasha Barbagat with you for today's episode of The Briefing. Iran's president is dead. So what happens next?
Given the wide divide between the population and the ruling regime, I think we are likely to see more eruptions of dissent, of opposition to the ruling regime, and more crackdowns.
Antoinette Lattouf breaks down everything you need to know about Iran's political, social and global future in the second half of the episode. First though, Katrina Blowers is here with me for the headlines. It is Thursday, May 23.
Hey Sasha, hi everyone. UK's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has announced a surprise general election for July 4. Now this is 6 months earlier than anticipated.
Now is the moment for Britain to choose its future. To decide whether we want to build on the progress we have made or risk going back to square one with no plan and no certainty. Earlier today, I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament. The King has granted this request, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
Yeah, there you go. Sunak has been PM since taking over from Liz Truss in late 2022. Her reign ended just 49 days after she took it. He's the leader of the Conservatives, also known as the Tories, but they aren't particularly popular in the polls. The Labor Party is led by Sir Keir Starmer and is currently on track to claim the race for government. So some very interesting times ahead, Sasha.
Yeah, last week a poll put Labor 27 percentage points ahead of the Tories, and there is speculation that the reason behind the early call is to capitalise on a situation where inflation is starting to fall in the UK and its economy is growing. Now, in that grab we just played, you might have heard a little bit of music in the background going, oh God, great time to, be holding a press conference. There's a party going on nearby. That was actually a little tongue-in-cheek move by someone. As Sunak was speaking, protesters started blasting D. Ream's "Things Can Only Get Better" on loudspeakers.
Well, things can only get better in the economy. And, in terms of strategy, I'm sure Anthony Albanese will be watching very closely whether that works for them, because let's hope it starts soon, once our economy starts regaining some momentum again and inflation comes down, we've got to hold a federal election here before the 27th of September next year. So timing is everything, as they say, and I think this will be a bit of a litmus test.
And the other thing, just for a little pop culture link, I had heard of Keir Starmer here and there, but recently his name's been in the news more because he's been caught up in the baby reindeer scandal. So the real-life Martha, who went on Piers Morgan the other week, she's been exposed by The Sun for allegedly stalking Keir Starmer and his family, sending hundreds of threatening emails to him in 2020. So a bit of a pop culture link there between the leader of the Labor Party.
Yeah, and he's also being called out for his middle-aged dad fashion choices, as is, we should say, Rishi Sunak. So Keir Starmer is wearing this label called Stone Island. It's they've got a range of polo shirts which cost about $350, and people like Drake wear them. So, for Keir Starmer to wear them, maybe, I'm going to leave the judgment up to you guys whether he should or not. But Rishi Sunak has been rocking out a pair of Adidas Sambas in an interview and has got a real pile on for that. People are saying that he's ruined the brand forever. I think he would have done better, Sasha, to have bought the dupes that are currently on sale at Big W, especially if he's talking about cost of living. The dupes only cost $25, a tenth of the price of the real ones.
Yeah, you got to love the wealth of the ruling elite. Spain, Ireland and Norway have announced they will recognise a Palestinian state.
Each of us will now undertake whatever national steps are necessary to give effect to that decision.
Irish Prime Minister Simon Harris speaking alongside the Spanish and Norwegian Prime Ministers there. The leaders have expressed their decision is not a move against Israel or for Hamas, but rather in favour of peace, coexistence and stability in the region.
Yeah, much of the Middle East, Africa and Asia already recognise the state of Palestine, but Australia, the US, Canada, Japan, South Korea and many Western European states do not. Earlier this month, 143 of the 193 members of the United Nations General Assembly voted in favour of it joining the UN.
Overnight, we've also had an update on one of the pro-Palestinian university encampments happening in Australia. So organisers at the Melbourne University encampment have announced they're going to end their protest on the university campus, saying that they'd had a, quote, huge win, with uni officials apparently telling them they'd agree to disclose connections to weapons manufacturers. Melbourne University has put out a statement saying it welcomes the decision, but it has not commented on what the negotiations with the protesters has looked like.
Australians caught up in that Singapore Airlines flight have started arriving home, describing their utter shock and fear when the plane was hit by sudden severe turbulence.
When that happened, I was really calm, but it wasn't till I got off the plane and sat in that room, and since then I can't stop crying. So my son has come to pick me up, and I said, I have to stay with you tonight to see my other children. Just got to hold them close.
Yeah, it would have been unbelievably frightening. 56 Australians were on board SQ321 on Tuesday from London to Singapore when it experienced a sudden drop of almost 2 kilometres in a matter of minutes and was forced to make an emergency landing in Bangkok. One passenger died while dozens of others were hospitalised, including 8 Australians. 3 are reportedly in intensive care. DFAT has confirmed it is providing consular assistance to those affected.
Some travel lawyers are coming out to claim that injured passengers could be in line for a really big compensation payout as well, some saying as much as 250,000 Australian dollars, which is absolutely huge. What happens now? Well, investigators are going to look into the incident on board this flight, and they're going to try to determine whether the incident could have been avoided at all, whether there was any way of steering clear of this turbulence. So more to come out of that story yet.
Breathtaking. What a goal from the Golden Girl.
Golden Girl indeed. Matilda's star Mary Fowler is going to elevate her Golden Girl status. She's going to be made into a brand new Barbie. The doll's maker, Mattel, has announced a new line of role model Barbies, which will include effigies of other prominent women's sporting heroes, including Venus Williams and a para-triathlete from Spain. The Mary doll will come complete with her iconic bubble braid and her black gloves. In a post on Instagram, Mary said she's grateful for the opportunity to capture and share a version of myself when I feel my strongest and most confident. Love it, Katrina.
I love it too. I think it's really cool. And I wonder whether they're going to incorporate any new Ken dolls into this situation. I mean, they don't have to, as the movie said. Ken is kind of irrelevant in many ways. But, of course, your mind always goes straight to people like David Beckham. I mean, he'd be the ultimate Ken doll. But I was thinking, wouldn't it be fun if they went a bit left of field and got Cam Smith as a Ken doll, like the mullet, the outfits. I'm here for it. I'd buy a Cam Smith Ken doll.
I'd buy one just because I'd want a doll with a mullet. I think that'd be great fun. My vote is Rogue. I'm going with 2-time Wallabies World Cup winner John Eales. He's a very tall man. I'd like to see an extra tall Ken doll. I feel like that would be a little bit of fun. Yeah, sorry, that's my bias showing through. I love the Wallabies and I think they should be honoured with their own Ken doll.
Well, Mattel, if you're listening, Sasha and I are on it. We will take a very modest fee as consultants. Thank you very much.
Katrina, thank you so much for being here for the headlines. Look, next we're going to change pace a little bit and have a look into what is going to happen next for Iran after the death of the country's president.
What
happens when a hardline president dies suddenly while in office? Well, that's the question being asked around the world following the death of Iran's President Ebrahim Raisi in a helicopter crash on Monday. And the president, along with the foreign minister, Hossein Amir-Abdollahain, died when the helicopter crashed in sudden fog. Is it sus? Is there more to the story than fog? And what does the power vacuum mean for internal politics in Iran and also for Middle Eastern relations more broadly? Professor Shahram Akbarzadeh is a research professor of Middle East and Central Asian politics at Deakin University. Professor Shahram, welcome to the briefing. So what do we know about the circumstances surrounding the president and the foreign minister's deaths in that helicopter crash?
Well, we know that they were flying in a very old helicopter that was probably made pre-1979 revolution, so more than 40-odd years old. We also know that Iran is under sanctions and the United States doesn't send spare parts to Iran to service the old and aging fleet of planes and helicopters. As a result, air accidents have been quite common in Iran. It's very likely that this has been a simple accident, helicopter flying in mountainous terrain, in fog, bad conditions. That now presents the Islamic Republic of Iran with a number of challenges as to who's going to come next as president and who's going to be nominated or anointed for being supreme leader.
I am interested in whether you understand why people's first reaction was, oh, that could be suspicious given the current global tensions. Are you confident that this isn't suspicious and more to do with, as you say, very old aircraft and lack of access to spare parts?
Well, we don't know all the facts, but there has been no indication that this was foul play. The Iranian authorities have not suggested anything otherwise. And in fact, if they do suggest otherwise, then there would be major implications. Of course, this is coming right after Iran and Israel clashed, exchanged missiles. And this was a turning point in the history of Iran and Israel, because up to this point, up to April, Iran and Israel had exchanged lots of rhetorical attacks, but nothing physical. So I wouldn't blame people to be suspicious that, something is happening here. Right after the exchange of fire, now the Iranian president crashes. So what's going on? But there hasn't been any suggestion of foul play, and I don't think we need to read any more into it.
Where do the foreign minister and the president fall within the ecosystem of power, given Iran has a supreme leader?
Well, the president is probably number 2 in the Iranian political system. The number 1, the head of state in Iran, is the supreme leader, as you mentioned. Ebrahim Raisi was a very loyal politician to the supreme leader. He made his way up the chain of command, so to speak, by really pushing the ideological agenda of the Islamic Republic. For a time, he served as a prosecutor of Tehran during the execution and killing of a number of political prisoners. So that's the kind of credentials you need to have in Iranian political system to move up the ranks.
So there will be no doubt people that are mourning the deaths of Raisi and Abdollahain, but there are also scenes of celebration, particularly amongst expat community. There's certainly many who won't shed a tear. Talk me through who these leaders were popular with and who they were loathed by.
Well, there is a major political divide in Iran. You did mention that some are mourning his death and some are celebrating. That's very true. If you recall the last parliamentary election in March this year, there were about 40% showing up to the ballot box and 60% did not. This is after repeated requests by the Supreme Leader saying that even if you disagree with me and my policies, still show up and vote for the parliament, because that is a show of support for the regime as a whole. That's the support base, which I would say is about 40%. The rest of the population is not happy with the way Iran is conducting itself. The rest of the population are concerned about their economic welfare, about having jobs and having money to buy food. And you have a large and growing youth population in Iran who are ambitious and want to connect with the world and want to have what we have in the West.
And who also have more progressive values, as we saw with the Women Life Freedom movement, as well as women taking to the streets. It was also young men, young students supporting them.
Absolutely. They are the modern part of the population. They subscribe to a lot of, you must say, liberal values, and they want individual liberties and freedoms. They want to enjoy their music and they want to wear whatever they want to wear, and they don't want to follow the strict Islamic code of dress.
So for those who aren't aware of Iran's modern history from the 1970s until now, you did mention earlier the 1979 revolution. Talk us through how much the nation has transformed over the past 4 decades.
Okay, that's a big question. How much has it transformed? Before the revolution, Iran was run by the Pahlavi dynasty. And there was a widely held perception that the Pahlavi dynasty was a stooge of the West, that it was undermining Iranian values and was benefiting the West, especially the United States. What happened following the revolution was that we had a series of measures to Islamize society and exclude voices of dissent.
So fast tracking to where we are now, obviously a lot of people are hearing about Iran who otherwise don't know a huge amount about Iran, largely because of its links to Hamas and the current conflict in Gaza. What implications could these 2 deaths have on Gaza and peace, if any, as well as obviously Hezbollah in southern Lebanon?
Well, I think the implications are going to be quite marginal. The supreme leader sets major strategic directions for Iran. The president is in charge of the executive branch and doesn't deviate from those major strategic priorities set by the supreme leader and the cohort of hardliners around him. So Iranian support for Hamas will continue because that is very much at the heart of the ruling regime's ideology and how they justify their position of power. Iran's antagonism towards the United States and Israel will continue. They're not going to drop these just because the president has died.
You say the changes to foreign policy will be marginal. What about domestically? Do you think there will be any significant shifts? Obviously, they need to find a new president.
Yes. So as I mentioned, loyalty to the supreme leader is key to advancement in politics in Iran. And we have had a situation where now all organs of power are firmly held in the hands of the conservatives and hardliners aligned with the supreme leader. You will have a pretty homogeneous field of candidates who are basically repeating what the supreme leader says.
Right.
So we'll have a carbon copy of Raisi.
Well, there have been some suggestions, perhaps by the optimists out there, that the upcoming presidential election might bring change in that, some experts are saying that the election presents an opportunity for the regime to bring back some sideline moderates.
I don't think that is a likely scenario. I'd like to have a chat with those experts who have that kind of rosy view of Iran. Tensions with the US are at all-time high. Now we have entered a new chapter of conflict with Israel. This is not a time for the ruling elite to be experimenting with bringing moderates in the fold. This is a time where they will circle the wagon and go even harder on their views.
We obviously here in the West followed the Women's Life Freedom movement. It was making headlines for quite a few months and then things went quiet. Unfortunately, news cycles move on like that. But the reality, the harsh reality for women continues. Do we have an insight into where that movement is up to, or have authorities come down quite hard on it and impacted the momentum?
So as a popular movement, I think, unfortunately, we have seen the end of women's life freedom, just because the regime has come down hard, as I mentioned. They have used brute force.
Yes.
The number of executions in Iran is again at all-time high. That means the regime has no tolerance for dissent, has no tolerance for opposing views, and has no intention of loosening control. But what the last experience demonstrated was that the level of fear in the population has dropped. Women of Iran have demonstrated and have proven to be fearless in the face of absolute brutality. And you still see Iranian women, especially in major cities, walking around without their headscarf, without their hijab, which is obviously illegal. But they are braving it, they're walking the street, they're in public domain without their headscarf. And this is a slap in the face of the ruling regime.
Yes.
But in terms of organized protest and organized rallies, even spontaneous organized rallies, that's not happening at the moment.
So obviously you've described a situation where there's internal pressure and dissent. There's a lot of external pressure, obviously, Iran squaring up to Israel in a way it never has in the past, and a younger generation who remain defiant and strong. Do you see this amounting to any change? Like, do you see a tipping point up ahead?
Judging on past record, given that the regime is brutal, has no hesitation in using brute force in suppressing dissent, and given the wide divide between the population and the ruling regime, I think we are likely to see more eruptions of dissent, of opposition to the ruling regime, and more crackdowns.
Here I am looking for a glimmer of hope, but I think realism is important. Sometimes the reality is brutal, right? That's the reality, and that's what history tells us. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Antoinette. Great to be here.
That was Professor Shahram Akbarzadeh, Research Fellow of Middle East and Central Asian Politics at Deakin University. And as you could hear there, quite a realist. So a difficult time, no doubt, for those dissenting in Iran, particularly women and the younger generation, and more tensions to be expected in the Middle East more broadly. That is all we have time for this morning. Before you go, though, we'd love it if you could share this app with someone you think might enjoy it too. And if you want to keep up with our other content, you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast, and we're on TikTok and YouTube too. Just search Listener Newsroom. I'm Antoinette Lattouf. Thanks for listening.
Listener.